So, first of all, thank you for being here early in the morning. It's the first official presentation, so I appreciate your presence at this hour. As you might well infer from the title of my presentation, this presentation is going to be very futurally oriented, perhaps unlike some of the presentations we've seen here, which are great in terms of sort of recollecting and honoring the past. That's a wonderful thing to do, but I think it's equally wonderful to wonder about our future trajectory and where our project is going, especially with respect to the time frame we're living in, which is, of course, the 21st century. So I want to, in this presentation, tell you and show you a little bit about an experiment, a kind of informal experiment I've been conducting over the last 3.5 years or so. And it's an experiment having to do with how we might begin to sort of propagate the kinds of psychology we care about. And at this point, let me own the kinds of psychology I care about. First of all, humanistic psychology, which is probably the common denominator for a lot of people in this room right now. Also existential and phenomenological modes of psychology, also Buddhist and meditative modalities of psychology. So those are the kinds of psychology that I'm interested in propagating and furthering with respect to the 21st century in which we live. So in order to do that, though, I'd like to set the stage a little bit for what I want to show you and tell you in the bulk of the time we have together, which is not a long time, which is why I'm talking so quickly, in case you're wondering about that. I haven't had too much coffee. So, last Tuesday, first thing about setting the stage. Last Tuesday, which was a day or two after the massacre in Las Vegas, I was giving a presentation in Mark Kunkel's faculty roundtable class, and the class began by someone asking Mark how he felt that day, and he said, "I feel a little sad because psychology as a whole seems to be ineffectual when it comes to the task of meeting and addressing the evil that we find in the world from day to day." So he said he felt a little sad about that. When he said that, I felt sad too, for much the same reason. You know, I think we were all a little emotionally raw because of the massacre, but I think it was exacerbated by the sense of ineffectuality. Like, here we have these great ideas which mean a lot to us, and we study them, and we try to sort of like enter into them as powerfully and deeply as we possibly can, and yet the evil that is so perennial in our world appears again and again and again, and it manifested itself a week ago in Las Vegas. Okay, so that's the first sort of way that's setting the stage for what I want to tell you. Second, yesterday at 1:30, Chris Henry, who is in the audience, this is Chris Henry right here, a former bandmate, gave a presentation that I think is very germane to what I want to tell you. His presentation was on how it is that humanistic psychology is represented in introductory textbooks these days. And I'd like to point to two observations that Chris Henry made, the first of which was the main point of his whole presentation, which is that for the most part, the kinds of psychology we care about are given pretty short shrift in introductory textbooks today. There's not a lot of extended elucidation of the ideas and thinkers of humanistic psychology, and much less on related and allied forms of psychology. So that's the first sort of thing. And the second thing that he said in his presentation, which I think is even more powerful and more germane, although it wasn't one of his main points, is that without an ongoing effort to engage the minds of future generations, the kinds of psychology we care about aren't going to be around for too much longer. This, I thought, was the more powerful point he made in his presentation. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. So this orientation with respect to future generations, I think, is a very important, it may be the most important issue for us who care about these modes of psychology. How are these ways of understanding, which seem so precious to us and seem so powerful to us, going to gain purchase and relevance, not only for us today who are in this room, but with respect to the much larger and much broader terrain of the social dynamics by which people construe meaning and ultimately reality in our world? That's extremely important. And the sort of third thing I'd like to mention by way of setting the stage is, I keep track of the time, this is so time-driven, that Mark Kunkel, in his presentation later that afternoon yesterday, gave a brief sort of presentation about his textbook that he is currently writing, which actually does treat humanistic and transpersonal and existential modes of psychology at some length, but at this, which is great, that's wonderful. But at the same time, he was lamenting the real challenge is getting students to read it. And then later, he sort of gave a name to this, and he said, it's the TLDR challenge. Okay, so those of you who are not necessarily fluent in the jargon of the internet, what that means is too long, didn't read. Your next cocktail party, possibly. Okay, yeah, I'm sure you knew it. All right, so let's look at the TLDR problem for a second. See, I think there's a reason why this has become sort of a popular meme and a popular kind of expression, and the reason is because that I think relatively few people actually are up to the business of reading long books and encountering long, finely wrought narratives. And in its place, I think the reason why people, including us probably, don't do a lot of that is because technology, for the most part, is giving us things that are way more directly stimulating and sort of way more able to arrest our attention and way more sort of entertaining and so on and so forth. So if it comes to the point where I personally have to decide later today whether to play Fallout 4 or read Moby Dick, I'm probably going to play Fallout 4, and I'm a 57-year-old college professor. So that's good for me. Imagine what it's like for people who are 30 or 40 years younger than I am. Okay, so this is part of what the TLDR meme is all about, that technology arrests our attention, I think, much more quickly and much more readily. And I think that ultimately what's going on is it's affecting the nature of how our consciousness even works. Okay, this is sort of a profound thing to take in, that's why I'm slowing down for this little part. I think we're starting to move away from the kind of consciousness that construes meaning and significance of our experience, mostly in terms of finely wrought literary narratives. We're moving away from that. Our lives are no longer like Moby Dick. And I think what we're moving toward is a kind of consciousness that construes meaning in much more fragmentary, soundbite-oriented ways. So my way of talking about this, I've given some terms to this, we're moving away from a literary form of consciousness into a more iconographic form of consciousness. What iconographic means is that our consciousness is becoming more like moving icons around on the screen. That's how we start to construe meaning and significance and what we pay attention to. It's much more like that. I'm speaking to the people in the hallway too, so they get a little mojo. Much more like that. So, I think that what this adds up to is if we really want to engage the next generation in the spirit of Chris Henry's sort of brief remark that he made in his presentation, it's incumbent upon us to retool our project and beginning to rethink our project in ways that bring it into alignment with the dominant forms of consciousness that are actually inhabiting our world, especially with respect to young people. I think this is vitally important. So I've been conducting, so that's the first part. So I've been conducting a 3.5-year-long experiment in seeing if I can start to do this. And my experiment has been to take the ideas and insights and thinkers and texts and vocabulary of humanistic psychology, of existential modes of psychology, precisely of phenomenology and Buddhist meditative forms of psychology, and see if I can give expression to them in the form of YouTube videos and see what happens if I do that. So this is my attempt to do that, and I have to sort of time things to see if I did plan to show you a video at this point that's only 3 minutes long. I'll go for it. Go for it. Could you expand that and show it, please? Turn the lights off.
Following YouTube's suggestion, this short video will serve as an introduction to my channel. Basically, my channel is about making the insights of academic psychology and philosophy accessible to a very wide range of people, and not only to specialists within those fields. I'm interested in doing this, first because I find value in helping people enter into the whole domain of philosophical and psychological inquiry, especially in a relatively easy and lighthearted way. At the same time, it seems to me that the fruits of the academic world are often made to seem overly inaccessible and esoteric, too cloaked and obfuscated by dense technical jargon, and too remote and irrelevant to the everyday run of life. And this seems like a real shame, mostly because I personally have found great value in academic insights, especially in the domains of philosophy and psychology. And so my desire is to make that value more accessible and more comprehensible to more people. As for my basic approach to psychology and philosophy, well, it comes down to three main perspectives. First, there are the phenomenological and existential approaches to psychology, which I've been involved with since the late 1980s. Beyond that, there's humanistic psychology, which I've been involved with since the mid-1990s. And most recently, I've become interested in Buddhist and meditative approaches to psychology. Of course, the main thread that binds these three perspectives together is that of holism, which I see as the singular life lesson that humanity is struggling to absorb at present, and which is definitely a recurrent motif in my videos. With regard to my style of presentation, well, I strive to attain a balance among three basic elements. First, I want my videos to convey intellectual substance, but I don't want them to be too encumbered by a ponderous seriousness. Instead, I try to approach my topics with a light and hopefully humorous touch, especially since I have a pretty zany and irreverent sense of humor myself. But beyond this, I want my videos to incorporate a lyrical, semi-poetic sensibility, especially so that my viewers can feel what I'm trying to convey and not merely understand it as another set of intellectualized abstractions. All in all, I hope that my channel is helping our world move a little more toward intellectual, emotional, and spiritual transcendence, both at the individual level and at the level of our shared humanity too. Because, well, to me, that's what seems to matter most in life. So, welcome to Uncle Eric's unprofessional, homebrewed in the bathtub video collection. Definitely not sold in stores.
Okay, so the clock is ticking, so let me tell you.
Too long.
Too long, did you Okay, so let me.
Cliff Notes version?
That was the Cliff Notes version. Okay, so let me tell you some of the advantages that I've noticed in conducting this 3.5-year-long informal experiment. So the advantages of propagating these kinds of thinking in this particular medium. First, it's free to produce and free to access. So what this means is that people, like the kind of socioeconomic sort of hierarchy that's based upon things like wealth and so on, it's accessible to people, so I like that part about it. Another advantage, my YouTube channel thus far has been viewed in over 200 nations and territories. You got my time. Making emotional worldwide. Okay, so global outreach, if you're about that. The reason why I'm emotional is because it kind of staggers me. Like when I think about what's going on in that 1 minute. Okay, second advantage, it's very egalitarian, so it's not based for the most part on an elitist structure or coterie of people that have privileged access to these insights. It's egalitarian across the worldwide population, or at least the 51% of the worldwide population that has access to the internet. A second, advantage. Okay, my channel thus far has been viewed 1.5 million times. And if you think about that, like a million of something is sort of a lot of something. I don't know if you've noticed. It's like you have to sort of count up a million of anything, that's kind of a lot of the anything. And you can wonder, to put this in perspective, like how many things have you done in your life that have actually directly touched more than 1 million people's lives? For me, I can't think of too many. I don't know about you, and this is really the only one that I can sort of name in my life. I've gained over 17,000 subscribers, which is quite a few thousand more than the entire student population here at West Georgia. So every lecture that I do on YouTube goes out to many thousands more than the combined student population here at West Georgia. So wonder about that for a second. Also, Q&A time. Okay, my last thing since I started it. Okay, so it facilitates a two-way discussion. At first, it seems like these videos are monologically structured. Actually, they're dialogically structured because on the comment boards, people write all kinds of things from all over parts of the world and so on and so forth. Okay, so how's that? I think he was a little bit ahead of you.
Yes.
Yogi.
Go ahead.
No.
Yogi.
I think this incredible idea that you have started to pull Buddhism into it may be the saving factor for the humanistic part as well. I'm Vajrayana Buddhist, and I have studied and practiced since '77. They're very open to those same values as Carl Rogers.
Well, I think so. I think there's a lot of overlap in sympathy.
Totally, it is Buddhism.
And one of the main points of intersection to me is mindfulness. To be able to listen in that Rogerian way.
Hello, of course.
Okay, Gus, I think you were second.
Show, don't tell.
Yeah.
That's what the internet has taught me. So I wish you had started by showing us some of your channel, and then maybe we could talk about what you were thinking.
You needed
Okay,
more.
so-
Because you lose us in the first 10 seconds. You didn't lose me, but if you just sit there and you're a talking head with nothing going on visual,
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah. Well, actually, most of my videos are all image oriented. This is a rare, well, relatively rare exception. About 2/3 of them are sort of, or 3/4 of them are image oriented.
Okay.
This one is.
How did you promote it to grow so fast?
Oh, that's another thing maybe I can mention is nothing. I did nothing to promote it other than when I put out a video, I send a message to my fellow faculty members in the department. So I promote it to those 17 people only. That's all I do.
My faculty
So let's
too
see
long
one of
didn't
these
watch.
Yeah. I think Laura's next.
Well, first of all, I'm definitely going to be a subscriber. I didn't
my
know that you were.
too.
I didn't know that you were doing this, and I think that a
Well,
lot
that's
of
because I don't promote it properly.
Well, obviously you don't need to, but I think that a lot of people my age and even younger who are interested in psychology and philosophy can really. This is a great platform for them.
Well, that's
Because
kind of
what
who I'm doing
everyone's
it
using.
for.
Yeah,
Is your
and so what you're
generation.
doing, I think, is wonderful.
Yeah.
Just a comment.
I
no
started
question.
off doing it actually for the students in my classes, but it's since expanded way beyond that.
Yeah, and so many people out there who don't have access to the awesomeness that is Eric Dodson. Yeah, now they do. So that's
Yeah.
really, really cool.
How do we find?
All you need to do is type in my name into YouTube, and here's my name. It's a very narcissistically named channel. My infinite narcissism.
I just want to say in one sentence, the images are awesome. I mean,
Okay.
I watch it thinking, God, how does he find all this stuff?
Yes.
You have to watch it twice,
It's for
once for the
free.
images and second.
Google Images, that's all I use.
I mean, they are
Total free
phenomenal.
totally free. I produced all these things. Only lately did I actually put some money into this. I had over 1 million viewers, and I had put $0, 0 cents into all of it.
Yeah, they are phenomenal.
Yes. I can't remember.
Candace, Apple Phoenix and Dragon Bookstore. The store was birthed from my thesis here.
Okay.
This beautiful young lady yesterday said, can we make more bridges? And I came in after thinking last night, I would love for us to have, I was amazed, there are people that don't know about West Georgia and the classes and the humanistic psychology. Once a month, invite you to start it, launch it, anyone here that would like to come speak about humanistic psychology and allied things. And we have 36,000 subscribers to our newsletter. Not all of them read every month. But our customer base and our younger, it used to be 40, 60-year-old women from Dunwoody. It's now much more diverse, much younger. I just referred one of my old employees to come work here, Lauren here, Gabby. So I think
Would you say the name of your store?
Phoenix and Dragon Bookstore
Oh, yeah,
in
it's
Sandy
awesome.
Springs.
It's great.
So
Okay. Well, all right. Okay. There's
I talked to Jeff
bridges
already.
to be built.
so he says yes.
And a lot of this project is about building those kinds of
And we're
bridges.
more high touch than high tech, so to have a little bit live is.
Okay, so one thing from Andrew, then I'll give you my parting thing.
Just one thing I just want to mention as a testimonial for Eric's videos is some talk with some of you all is I've been working in a very mainstream clinical psychology program as of late. one of my colleagues who's the director of the program was a little nervous about a lot of humanistic existential psychology, mainly because, Chris, of what you were saying in your article about a lot of things being presented very poorly in textbooks and so forth. She saw your videos. She was preparing a course in history and systems on humanistic and existential, and basically had to change her lecture notes based on your videos because she didn't realize how inaccurate
Changing people's perspectives, that's why
Bingo.
I'm responding that way.
Bingo.
It's like entering into the process wherein people transcend the perspectives they have and enter into deeper ones. That
Yes.
to me is paper. Okay, here's my last thing, because we're at the time limit at this point. Here's what I was going to end on, and I skipped a whole bunch of stuff. You know, in humanistic psychology and related forms of psychology, we tend to talk a lot about potential. And usually when we talk about potential, we're talking about, in an individual sense, coming into our own individual potential, in a collective sense too, like with respect to perhaps humanity's coming into its deeper potential. But I think that humanistic psychology itself has a potential. And this we tend not to talk about too much. So my project is all about hopefully furthering that potential that I think is inherent and still relevant to our world with respect to humanistic psychology and allied psychologies, the kind of stuff that we actually care about, that itself has a potential. So the question I want to leave you with is, what are we willing to do? What are we willing to do to pursue and fulfill the arc of that deep potential that is inherent to our collective and shared project? Thank you for your time.